Hello! We're going to be making some different types of tape today, just playing with some tape. And the reason I needed to do this is because I'd made my last batch of faux vintage tape on some polythene packaging, which seemed like a really good idea. I thought I could cut it into the lengths that I wanted. However, when I went to use it, I realised that the polythene packaging was way too thin and it just tore off, as you can see. So I decided I needed to play with tape and make some more vintage tape today. So I grabbed one of my plastic file folders, and as you can see, I've started to add little pieces of tape to this. It is two-sided. We're going to do something different on each side. So I'm just going to lay down my tape, as you can see, until I've covered that one side. So you can see that side's now completely covered with tape. I'm going to flip it over and completely cover the other side with tape as well. Now both sides are completely covered with tape. I'm going to put on my gloves because I'm using alcohol ink for this. I'm going to be using Latte and Dijon to start with. Now, Latte is a little bit darker, so I like my tape to be quite light. If I want a piece darker, then I'll do that at the time. But as a rule, I use it a little bit lighter. So I'm adding the Dijon first. That's quite a nice yellow colour. Just going to use my blending tool to move that around. And I'm adding the latte to some of those gaps where you can see I've not got any colour. And I'm moving that about before I use my alcohol solution. And again, I'm blending that in. I'm trying to clear it. I don't want too much ink on my tape. You can see some areas are quite bare now. So I'm just going to go in with a little bit where I think it needs it and just blend that in again with a bit more blending solution until I'm happy with what I've got. So you can see that's quite subtle. It's not too dark. Like I said, I can add more if I want to when I'm going to use it, but I do like some of the effects I've got. There's just a couple of bits that I'm not happy with. They're too bare. So I'm just going to touch those up with a tiny bit more ink and blending solution. And now I'm happy with that. We've got the yellow kind of tape background. Because we have some Halloween projects coming up, I am going to just those last that last end of the paper, I'm going to pull out a really bright red, and this is rosewood. And I'm going to add that to the right hand side of my tape. I've still got that yellow as a base colour. I'm going to apply it to my brush this time. It looks really, really bright when you first add it. So I'm adding some dabs, adding my alcohol solution, and then I'm going to just keep blending until I get something that I'm quite happy with. And by using the dabber, you can see you actually get some really nice kind of blood effects on that tape. Obviously, this is not for everybody, but I just thought it would be fun for some of the projects I want to do. I actually decided to cut those 2 sheets in half, and I'm now going to work on this piece, and this is going to be something completely different. I'm not going to use yellow. This time I'm going to use my pitch black, but again, I want it really subtle. So you're going to see I add the ink, add the blending solution, and just try to wipe away until I'm happy with the effect I get on the tape. Again, it's kind of more for a Halloween, darker, grungy kind of journal. So you get some really nice effects once you've added your blending solution if you turn it over and rub onto it and blot ink where you want the ink to go. It actually looks really quite cool. I love how this came out. So this is my finished black tape. It's quite subtle. It doesn't actually look as dark as you might think once you put it into your paper. I'm really happy with how it turned out. So now we're going to move on to a different tape project. I've now grabbed out my parcel tape, and if you've seen my faux mica, you'll know why I'm doing this. I'm just pulling the tape up and down, moving it about, trying to get some marks into that tape, and I'm going to pull off, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 inches, and you can kind of see the marks you get. Maybe not quite so much as you can in real life as you can on the film, but what I'm going to do is just move that around, unfold that little bit that gets stuck. I don't want to make it too perfect, and then I'm just going to fold a piece over. So fold that in half. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's actually better if it's not perfect. And then I'm just going to cut that little piece off. And I'm just going to make 3 of these little pieces. Just fold over the edge. And when I bring that up to the camera, you'll actually be able to see the blemishes that pulling the tape up and down causes, plus the folding it over, you get those little crease marks. And that is exactly the effect I was looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and make another couple of little pieces like this. Now I've got my 3 pieces, I'm going to take my bone folder and just push those down just to make sure any creases are firmly stuck. I do like the creases, but you do need to make sure that they are firmly stuck down. And I'm going back in with my pitch black alcohol ink, and what I'm going to be doing is making sure that I have a clear area in the middle and it's darker around the edge, and I'm going to do that by just using the blending solution to manipulate that ink and move it around to where I want. I'm also going to be using my mat to dip it in. You can see there are still little pieces of tape and I do struggle with my tool in places, but that's fine, it works out. So I also made some longer strips before I started filming, and you can see it's a similar effect. And what I also did was use some double-sided tape and stick some tape that I'd inked onto that double-sided tape, and I've used it here. It's quite shiny, but I really do love the effect of that black alcohol ink. I was really happy with how this turned out, and what I'm going to do is just show you an idea of how this can be used and how I intend to use it. So these are from my Peculiar kit, and you can see if you add it over the top of a photograph, you get a really kind of cool effect on that photograph. It's like mica, but the black really does help. So this time I'm going to find a dictionary page that relates to the word haunted, being Halloween. This is a vintage dictionary. It's got no coating on the paper, and you do have to be careful with this technique because some papers will work, some won't. If it's a shiny page, it probably won't work. So I'm adding my tape over some of this text. It's all haunted, haunt, and you'll be surprised how many different definitions there actually are going back to when this dictionary was made. So I'm just smoothing out my tape, making sure it's really, really well stuck. Once I'm happy that that's really stuck down, I'm going to turn it over and spray the back with water. And then what I'm going to do is just let that water soak in and slowly start to rub away the paper from the back of the tape. Now this will make the tape not sticky, and it will have to be either glued or stitched or adhered to your project in another way because it's no longer going to be tape, but you do get a really cool effect. It takes a minute just to rub off that paper from the back. You need to be careful you don't go too far, but you can start to see here the effect you get. It turns it into almost like a kind of washi tape. So the tape does become quite transparent. I tend to leave a little bit of the original paper round the edge. It just makes it a little bit easier to glue. But you can take off as much as you want. You obviously just don't want to take it too far and remove everything from your tape. But it does make a really cool addition to a project. Putting it against the white background actually doesn't show you how it's going to work at all. So I can remove a little bit extra if I need to, but like I said, it is a really cool technique. Unfortunately, I didn't actually film this particular piece. This is an Amazon envelope. It was a padded envelope, but it had that kind of crinkled paper on the inside. So I take gathered twig and antique linen, distress spray, and also crackling campfire. And I have already spritzed this, and because it didn't film, I've actually already let it dry. So I'm going to move on to an oxide ink now, and this is, I think, pumice stone. So yeah, I've got my pumice stone and I'm just going to add some spritzers. I'm only going to use a little bit of pressure when I put this down, just so I get some splodges, just to lighten that up. And I'm going to just leave that to dry now. While that's drying, I wanted to try and make some kind of faux fabric tape. And what I used was the tape, the medical tape. It's got quite a nice texture to it. It's a little bit rough and it does feel a little bit like fabric. So what I did was took an A4 sheet of paper and just ran lots of strips of this over the paper. And then I put it through my printer. I used one of my digital kits. I think it was Pretty Patchwork. And it worked okay. It wasn't too bad. What I then had to do was on the other side is run a row of double-sided tape, which was a little bit tricky. It was a bit fiddly and cutting that out. That's why I haven't shown that on camera, but it did work. Another digital that I tried did not work at all. Then I thought I was going to have a go with some Tim Holtz collage paper. It's really, really thin, as you probably know, and you can get some really pretty pictures off these, really pretty textures. So I'm going to turn that over and I'm going to add some of my double-sided tape. It's a little bit curly, so it is a little bit tricky to do this, but I'm using this as a 1-inch tape. So make sure that's really well stuck down and then cut it out. Again, it's really easy to cut this. It's not like having the 2 layers of tape with like the medical tape. And you can see here are some that I'd already made. but it is very white, this particular one. So what I'm going to do is just use my brush and a little bit of ink just to show you that you can actually darken that up and make it look a little bit more vintage. And then you just take the back off and you've got some tape. You could obviously use napkins for that idea as well. That would give you a really nice kind of fabric texture. I'm now going back to that textured paper from the envelope and adding some of my double-sided tape. I use a thicker one and then I use a thinner one. I'm actually really pleased how this turned out, but I didn't do any more than these 2 strips as yet, but it's all ready to go. So I'm going to cut that out along the edge of my double-sided tape, and you can see you actually get some nice scraps as well, but some really nice kind of textured tape ready to add to a project. This is the last project, which I'm really happy how this turned out. I found this calligraphy paper. It's really, really lightweight, and this was because I didn't actually want to use any of my particular napkins to try and make tape. This is textured, so it does give you an almost fabric kind of effect. I set my printer to accept this size paper and I printed some of my Creepy Creep ephemera, the strips. So what I do is turn it over, add my tape, pick out the pieces that I want to add tape to, and you can see you get actually some little areas that you can't actually catch on the tape. So I'm just going to add some tape and then we're going to cut them out and see what we've got. I absolutely loved how this turned out. You can use any digital, like I said, or you can use book pages for this. It would work just as well, but you won't get that paper. You can use tape, double-sided tape on anything to turn it into your own tapes. I just go around the edge of this with my black archival ink just to give it a bit of an edge, because sometimes you get a little bit of the white paper showing. I don't want to cut the tape, so I'm really happy. This is a picture from the kit that I've just printed onto that paper and backed onto cardstock. I just wanted to show you the effect you get. It's almost like a canvas. It is a really, really lovely paper, but you do need to check your printer will take that particular paper. So that is my final tape project for today. I hope this has given you some ideas. So we've got the fabric tape, faux fabric tape I made using the medical tape, which didn't work particularly well. The collage paper, the padded textured envelope, which I absolutely love. I'll definitely be making more of that. We've got the tape with the dictionary book page that we rubbed away. I made the faux vintage tape using the alcohol inks. We've got the yellow, the red and the black, which I absolutely love. The larger pieces, which are almost like a faux mica. The little faux mica tape, which I also love. And then our calligraphy paper, which I think is my favourite of the projects. I really hope you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll see you really soon.